Daryl, you're back as spokesperson and you're already in the saddle. You wrote a letter to MNBC's main bankers, RBC, last November. What was the response to that letter?
Well, actually, I didn't receive any response till just last week when I got a call from the bank stating that they wanted to sit down and talk to the CCMC. And to my shock, it was like 5 months later, and now we're getting response. Although I have to say, I am quite happy that they are responding now.
Keith, you were there as an observer. What did you bring to the bank's attention that they were not aware of?
Well, what we brought forward was still building off the same three issues that we raised in the November 1st letter. Was the ballooning administrative debt at that time, the unpaid property taxes, and a potential misuse of the additional line of credit. When MNBC got the mortgage on the school, they got an additional $800,000 line of credit to fix the school. But when we actually analyzed the 2009-2010 financial statements of the MNBC, that number doesn't appear. It's part of an overall consolidation. They've used the money, but it looks like they've only drawn against or fixed the school to the tune of maybe another, at most, $80,000 out of that $784,000 last year. So we raised those as three serious concerns. The bank, to their credit, followed up on those three issues. So we spent a significant amount of time. We had our chartered accountant, our independent chartered accountant, provide the methodology of how we got around those numbers, and just really tried to lay it out for the bank clearly that this is an ongoing concern. What I think was most difficult and continues to be most difficult for me is the MNBC leadership and management last September at the annual general meeting, at the end of September last year, they were finally forced to say to the delegates there that yes, we overspent last year by $1.3 million. You think as proper managers they would have said, okay, we better cut costs now. At the MNGA, we just had recently our Métis Nation Governing Assembly now end of February, 5 months later, they tell the people, oh, by the way, we're now going to realize another $720,000 at least in administrative overspending. That's not news to us. We've been saying that since we analyzed those MNBC statements last September. So that kind of stuff supports our call to the bank about those three issues, and that's one of the issues we raised. And the disappointing thing for me, and getting back to, is that as managers, you would have thought MNBC would have cut those costs last September. We could be only in debt $300,000 or $400,000, but no, they chose to stick their heads in the sand, as we've said many times, and they just carry on spending money they don't have. And it just boggles my mind as a business entrepreneur.
Tell me something, Daryl. There were a lot of promises made at the AGM, which not only the supporters and people believe, but apparently the bank as well, that Metis Catering was going to produce some real windfall profits that would be able to rise this school out of its debt.
Yeah, that was shocking for me, because they had said they were going to raise about $1.5 million in a 3-year period. And of course that never came about. And to tell you the truth, I myself checked in to Metis Catering, and that is not a corporate entity in the province of British Columbia. I don't know now, but when I checked it some months ago, it was not a corporate entity. So what really concerned me was what the Chief Operating Officer, Dean Tremblay, said at that AGM. He had stated that the people had given them mandate, so basically they were going to stay on the same course. And that was really troubling to me.
So Keith, you have experience in the restaurant and the hospitality industry. To generate those kind of profits, what would you need as a structure?
Well, I'll give you an example. I just did a business plan and feasibility study around a certain large franchise with a strong brand. And for that franchise to make $500,000 a year, we're talking having to have sales in the area. We're talking a restaurant that has a physical location like what we see at the school. You're talking about probably $4.5 to $5 million in gross sales, and you'd be lucky if you walked away with 10% profitability. In the restaurant and hospitality industry, it's very challenging to see big revenues. So for the Metis Catering to be making, or for folks at MNBC stating that there's somehow Metis Catering is going to make $500,000 a year in net profit, that's quite, it's an extremely bold and educated statement as far as I'm concerned. I remember listening to the MNBC presentation in 2009 when they sold the school to the delegates at that AGM, almost 2 years ago now, when they said these are one of the ways they're going to pay for it. And from what I heard with our meeting with the Royal Bank, they found that quite interesting. They asked us a few questions about our understanding of Meets Catering, and it almost seemed to imply that the bank themselves were also believing that there was going to be a guarantee of certain revenues through Meets Catering and these sorts of things that were going to help, worst case scenario, cover the mortgage payments with the additional line of credit of $24,000 a month. We all know that's not happening, and here we are 2 years later, and again, I stress the bubble is still coming in terms of the ballooning administrative debt, because we haven't actually started paying on the demand loan of the $2.2 million until this June. So that's a $14,000 touch a month. Now, this last month, we finally made our first payment, according to the financial statements, on the additional line of credit of $9,000. So when you add these things up, it really is it's going to handcuff the nation financially for years and years and years. That's just to keep on top of it. Never mind paying back the $2.5 million that we're roughly in the hole as of this March 31st.
So let's talk a bit of politics. If the bank calls the loan, the nation suddenly finds itself bankrupt. What would a chartered community president, where would he find someplace to get out of the rain? Is there room for him at a CCMC?
Well, I'm just going to say this. I mean, the MNBC is nothing more. It's become nothing more than a service delivery agency. That's what we've become, a trade school and a service delivery agency. It doesn't take much to start a service delivery agency, quite frankly. We incorporate, get a board of directors, and quite honestly, that's the coalition is getting a number of calls from the grassroots citizens that maybe it's time to look at another organization as an option. And the coalition, I know the executive team is looking at it quite seriously, and we're looking at giving people a future alternative. And I think leading into the Metis Summit on April 16th, that's going to be an important discussion as part of that overall agenda that day.
Obviously, there is an opportunity here for Metis to reorganize around a new sort of debt-free structure. So let's talk a little bit about how that might work out at the summit.
Well, from my perspective, I think I think we are the alternative, and I think this Métis Summit is going to show that. We're going to see what the people want. We're going to talk about the citizenship. We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about culture, and we'll see what people think.
And all important, I think, another one of your pillars is identity.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the summit itself. When you look at the main themes of the summit, I mean, we've now let people know, and I mean, people can't lose sight of the fact that the reason this is all seemingly almost becoming the train seems to be moving down that road or that track, whether we wanted it to or not. It's because people are really looking for an alternative right now. They're looking for a way to move forward. I mean, I can't understand. I mean, MNBC, as of yesterday, I have it on good sources, they've now let go of another couple admin staff, and I'm sure that's part of the cost-cutting measures they've got to do to make ends meet there in 2010, 2011, as what they get ready for that the fiscal year, April 1st. So I really think that people see that it's time for some changes, and I think the summit's going to show people that we don't need to be handcuffed by this mess. We didn't create it. We can move forward. We can focus on the things that matter to the grassroots citizen, and what matters to them is their identity, their culture, and education. Those are the three most important things we can help with our citizens. This stuff about debts, it's surreal to the grassroots people. They could care less because it's not coming out of their personal checking or savings account. What they care about is, tell me how my kids and my family are going to be proud of who they are, and how are they going to celebrate their nationhood. And I think the coalition can provide that vacuum right now, because it's certainly, the Métis Nation BC is in no position to be doing that for the next number of years, because they're going to be too focused on competing for every dollar they can find out there, trying to outbid every service delivery agency, because they've got no choice. They're in debt, massive amounts of money, and I just will end with, I can't understand why the governments can sit there and fund an organization with this much financial risk. It's in their own Treasury Board guidelines, whether it's the feds or the province, it's very clear that organizations at financial risk may or may not be eligible to receive new contracts. Somehow these guys can be millions of dollars in the hole and carry on. I've never seen it before in all of this country. Any other organization would have been shut down. Somehow MNBC is staying afloat, and I just think that's because there's a lot of politics federally that are at play behind the scenes that I just don't understand, and I don't support. I think it's sending the wrong message to our citizens throughout BC. I think it's the wrong message to send to any Aboriginal group in Canada. So I feel very strongly about that.
Sort of like, Daryl, you encourage people to drive around with flat tires. You know, I mean, it's not a correct structure. It isn't managed well. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, my thoughts is, I want to clarify something. It's never been us against them. That has never been it. We started out with a handful of citizens that wanted some accountability and some transparency. And then, you know, it's never been about anything else. We're concerned because of those three issues that Keith has mentioned. The citizenship, the culture. You know, these things are very important to Métis citizens, and we've got to get back to that. We don't, you know, this debt has nothing to do with it, really. This is just something that we feel, as the coalition, we feel we want people to know there is an alternative. And as Keith had mentioned, people really don't care about debts and finances. They just want to get back to being them, getting back to what matters to them most.
Well spoken.